We're going to take 2 minutes changing laptops, and then this man who's in this chair will magically rise and drift towards the mic like smoke from a...
I was just hoping that Ram would take over. Where are you sitting?
Standing.
Oh, standing. Ah, there you are, very ominous. Can we have the lights off? Then we can just go. No, I'd rather have, since I need to start it, well, to my father and to all the young photographers here, all those who are thinking of engaging with photography. What I'm going to do is try and share my work with my father's work, something that I've been trying to experiment with now for the last year or more, and let's see how it goes. This is the introduction to my father, who died in 1985 at a fairly young age of 58. He was a young man, or a young boy, who walked across from Burma when the Second World War was unfolding. And Amitav Ghosh, the writer, in his book, The Glass Palace, kind of touches very beautifully on that journey, though it's completely different because there's an Indian character there, but in this case, my father was of Burmese origin, and in that sense, Vidhu's talk earlier was very touching because it talks about displacement. And so was my mother, who is of part Bengali and part Punjabi origin, and came from Pakistan during the partition, and I think Dinesh referred to that. So my mother and father met in Delhi at the college St. Stephen's, and then I was made in New Delhi. So in that sense, I am of double refugee parents, and then as I think of mixed origin, growing up in Delhi in the 50s, 60s, into the 70s, I found myself as a young teenager rather disconnected, and the school that I went to sort of finally threw their hands up and said, okay, it's time for you to go. And I had to sort of think whether I wanted to continue. I did try and go to a government school for 2 weeks. It was Hindi medium, and I think that sort of definitely decided for me that education was not where I was going to go. And then I moved and started to work, travel. Some of my early work was for the NGOs like Red Cross, some of the UN. And then I found that sort of not satisfactory enough, and Delhi was still very provincial. It's grown since then phenomenally. And I went to Bombay to work as a stills photographer in the film industry. But before that, in 1974, I started to shoot at the tail end of the hippie movement and all the Western travelers coming here. And that was sort of like the end of the hippie movement and the rise of the junkie movement. And I shot pictures of a woman or a group of people using morphine here because it was very easily available. This is a sort of diagram of the links that I have. My mother came from Lahore, where she went to college there, but their home was in Sargodha. She moved to Delhi. My father moved to Delhi. He came up the General Stilwell route, and then by train from Tinsukia to Calcutta and then to Delhi. We have, from the Bengali side of my mother, we have relationships in Kunch Bihar. They go all the way into Bangladesh, into the Chittagong hill tracts. And then my father schooled in Rangoon before he left. But his ancestral home is in Tavoy, which is at the bottom of the coast. And now when I put the map, you get an idea of the kind of diagonal that sort of encompasses my family links. And it's something that I've been thinking about working on, but haven't gotten there as yet. That's my mother reading Thought magazine, which was an art and intellectual, also political journal in the 50s to the 70s. It sort of folded, died a death. My father painting. This was in Almora, which is in the north, in the hills. And every summer we went up and rented a cottage, and life was kind of nice those days. This is again in Almora. My brother wasn't born then, so there are really 4 members of the family. And so once I got kind of thrown out of school, I had this sort of outsider sense of being kind of marginal. And I think it drew me into a lot of the marginal communities that I started to document at that time. And this is what won me the World Press Photo Award at a fairly young age. It's an 8-part series.
How old were you?
When I shot it, I must have been about 18, and I was awarded sort of when I was 19 into my 20s. And then going into the film studios was one way of getting work. And though while I photographed around the film studios as production stills for companies or individual producers, I did try and take photographs around that. And one of the big mentors for me was Satyajit Ray, not actively as a mentor, but just to be around him, photograph him, go to his home, look through the library of books he had, have some conversations when he had time, and just sort of watch how he engaged with his medium. And in that sense, one of the learning curves for me was cinema, where I often worked. The reason to work on set was to be able to see how the cameraman lit, shot, and approached the subject matter. One of my big heroes was Sven Nykvist, who is Bergman's cameraman, and I was very fortunate to work on a Columbia Picture film when he came to India for 2 weeks, and it was like God had descended. This is a little dialogue that I've tried to do between my father and my work. This is self-portrait my father photographed of himself. This is a self-portrait I've done of myself. A kitchen in one of our homes. A bathroom that I photographed in one of our homes. Holiday up in the hills with his friends, my friends in their living room in Calcutta. Us sleeping, my mother reading, my friends and me hanging out, my mother wearing a sari, my friends trying to freak out, me and my brother in our little bathroom at the St. Stephen's College Rock Fest, swinging in the same way. Me and a camera at a very young age, my father in a pensive mood after he's just written his piece. My father photographed his artist friends. I photographed my not so artistic friends. Me trying to play the guitar, and I photographed my friends who tried to play the guitar. Me trying to be a writer, I photographed myself, my brother, I guess just trying to think. My mother and father in a happier moment, I photographed them in not such a happy moment. A self-portrait that my father did of himself in the bathroom window, mirror. I photographed myself somewhere in an unknown hotel. A street scene, I believe it's Ahmedabad, it could be somewhere in Rajasthan. I photographed a lame beggar in Bombay. The Imperial Hotel dining area, the Asiatic Library in Bombay, birds flying somewhere, I think, in Sanchi, birds flying in Bombay, Narendra Place, which is off Parliament Street, next to the Jantar Mantar in Connaught Place area. That's Laburnum Road in Bombay. Kotla, the old timber market, which has changed now tremendously, and in downtown Colaba, which has equally changed now, and this is no more. Buffaloes in water in Chennai, fishermen in Nariman Point area, the river Ganges, somewhere near Mahalakshmi Temple in Bombay, a night scene somewhere where we used to live in North Delhi, and this is from the balcony of my house in South Delhi. I try sort of now to continue with this kind of dialogue. It's less successful than what I tried to do earlier, but I still try. This is M.F. Hussain, the painter who recently died as a young man. Krishnan, Sabawala, and Birande. Sabawala recently died, before him Birande died. Krishnan died many years ago, but they're all dead now. Jairam Patel and Nasreen Mohammadi. Jairam is alive, Nasreen died years ago. The painter Krishan Khanna, who is still alive, and his son Karan is the photographer. The poet, writer, journalist Rakshat Puri. Again, Rakshat in another place. The painter Birande with his tantric sunbursts. The painter G.R. Santosh. This is what Sridharani Gallery used to look like years ago. You can see Hussain with Shiv and Suvira Kapoor. There were windows. Later on, that gallery is now, this face of the gallery has been closed for more wall space. Two artists, one is Dhanraj Bhagat, I don't know who the other is. probably kind of in a drunken fight. Ram, I've gone blank. Yeah. Bhupen Kakkar at Sousa in New York. And that we saw earlier, that's Jairam, that's Navina, who is Vivan Sundaram's sister, and I don't know who the last person is. And when I was photographing in France in 2009 on a project that I've continued to do over 20 years, broken in bits and pieces, I started to look at the artists in Paris of Indian origin, and that's Anju Chaudhary at her gallery. That's Anju Chaudhary in her studio / home. Akitam Narayanan at home, and above in the same flat in his studio. This is Shakti Burman studio. Shakti Burman painting. Shakti Burman with his wife and daughter. Vishwanathan in his studio. Again, Vishwanathan pontificating. Vishwanathan seated. That's Raza as we exited a bar. And Raza at home in Paris before he relocated to Delhi. That's Mohanjit. She has a boutique and a shop, and she's been there as one of the old guard in Paris for years. Pavandas Baul, the Baul singer. Sharmila Roy, who's a painter and a musician. And then again, with the work in America. My father went to America in the mid or early 70s on what was called the John D. Rockefeller III Fund, which was a grant for visiting artists from Asia. And that's when the trouble started for me in school. That's what people say. I don't believe so. I was having such a good time. They weren't around. That somebody get the lights. And I think that's when his sort of documentary style of photography really sort of flowered. And these are pictures he took in New York and some other spaces in America. That's Times Square. Shop window. Well, that's more like a shop window. In the Metropolitan Museum. Street. Self-portrait. And then I went in 1987 for under the same scholarship or residency or grant. By then, the John D. Rockefeller III Fund had been renamed as the Asian Cultural Council. And I went there, they gave the grant under the scheme visiting gallery and museum program, but I told them that I wanted to do something more. And I chose to travel through America and photograph. And so this is in California, a good Punjabi raised in farmer. That's Mr. Joel Senior in Yuba City. And Yuba City is one of those places north of Sacramento in California, where there's a high density of Indians, and they all farm peaches, prunes. These are fresh arrivals, what they call FOBs, fresh off the boat. You can see the parantha, the flask has lassi, there's an achar bottle, so everything sort of remained pretty much intact in the cuisine. Nand Kaur in her home, the Ori couple, Mr. and Mrs. Ori. This is where you had mixed marriages, and I met people by the name of Mario Singh. So, you know, you had the Mexican side and you had the Indian side. And the Indians, like, you know, you heard the story about the war camps where the Chinese went after the 1962 war. After Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese, Americans passed a law called the Alien Land Laws. And that was actually just for the Japanese, but it kind of extended to all Asians. And what was going to happen is that the ownership of the lands were going to be appropriated by the government. So the Indians were very clever. Since they'd worked with the Mexican women in the fields, they quickly married them and transferred the land to their Mexican wives' names. That second generation Mexican Indian boy marrying a Venezuelan girl. A wedding in the back of a church. A Mercedes-Benz dealer in his country house, garden. Patel Motel owner. As Chitresh Das with his all blonde Kathak troupe. That's Mr. Hot Yoga, and he's very famous now. He patented his yoga, and I forget his, yeah, Bikram, yeah. Jain gurus in upstate New York eating vegetarian tacos. This is Pratap Aditya Paul, who was then the curator of the LA County Museum, and he did great work here and built the collection up phenomenally. Steve Banerjee, who owned and ran Chippendales, the mail strip chain. Spoonie Singh and Sons in the Hollywood Wax Museum. Susie Coelho, who ran a shop called A Star Is Born. That's Dr. Patel, who invented the CO2 laser. And for a long time, this invention was just lying around, like inventors are. They invent things or processes, and they find commercial use much later. That's Arun Natravali, who at Bell Labs. And this was in 87, 88, the state of digital video imaging. The room that he's in is the bank of computers that was needed to squish images. Now I think you can do it on your phone. So that's how technology has moved. This is at the India Day Parade, the end of it, at Madison Avenue and 23rd Street. Again, the India Day Parade. More at the India Day Parade afloat. very important Indians. And at the Diwali Mela at the South Street Seaport, somebody selling Krishna posters. Going further with that sort of whole thing of trying to work with my father's work and mine, he photographed us sleeping a lot. I guess we were a family that slept a lot, which I'm not sure if it's a good thing, but I think if you have good sleep, it's great. My brother, that's me and my brother, my mother and my brother, my mother and me. And I started to go through my archive and started to find how I was drawn to sleep as something that I photographed a lot. And for me it was interesting to see the street photography show up here at the Habitat Center that Devika's done so nicely. And there I found other examples of sleep which were kind of interesting for me to look at. That's in Bombay. Again in Bombay. In Calcutta at the pavement. And then I sort of try and look at, I've always looked at death as a way of permanent sleep, and that's Mother Teresa after she had just died the next morning. Or in Bangladesh, where so much natural catastrophe takes place and animals, human beings all die. Or here, again, when the bodies of humans and animals wash up a few days later. Or Mrs. Gandhi in state. Or after the Sikh riots.
Sorry. Can I put it on silent, you know?
Ram, that's your new phone, right? There's a, flip the switch on the side.
Turn it off?
No, top left-hand corner. You'll see a silent or right. And that's a picture from Bhopal, which I got the World Press Photo Award for. Just very quickly to go through some, as a sort of historical walkthrough of my work. This is from Punjab, from the 80s when the conflict happened and then started to decline. Again, this is from when we were, before what has happened was so wonderfully here now, what Dinesh and Prashant have been able to do. We were a small group, or not such a small group, fairly medium-sized group called the Forum of Contemporary Photographers. And we did this one show on Punjab, coming out of the sort of age of terrorism. This is during the peak of it, where you had Khalistani passports inside the Golden Temple complex. That's Sant Bhindanwale, the leader of that movement who spearheaded it. That's one of the surrenders at the Golden Temple. I believe it is Black Thunder 2. Again, after the Sikh riots, after Mrs. Gandhi, for those who don't know, after Mrs. Gandhi died or was killed by her Sikh bodyguards, Hindus went on a rampage and attacked Sikhs, killing them and looting and burning property. And that's at Mrs. Gandhi's funeral. So a few things are out of sort of sync in date timelines. And I was a young photographer then. From 1983, I went into the media, found myself a French-American photo agency. Dinesh, your computer's gone slow. Anyway. Anyway, so I'm stuck at this point. We'll see. Sort of 83, and then Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated in 84. Rajiv Gandhi came up. I was a young photographer. I got his attention, did his official portraits. There were others too. There was Dilip Mehta, Raghu Rai, but we were the sort of like the chosen few who were traveling a lot with him. I traveled extensively when he made his trip to the West, and then we ended up in Cuba with Castro. This is Rajiv and Sonia in Mizoram in the Northeast. That's when, again, when Rajiv got killed by a LTTE bomber. Rajiv's funeral. And then Babri Masjid happened. Over a period of time, there was this whole claim for in Ayodhya that Ram was born at the spot where the Babri Mosque is built, and then it was demolished. And what I thought is I'd show you, especially for the younger photographers, of how magazines ran spreads. So 12 pages, fairly large pictures. And again, in Bangladesh, I was sort of, I had the sort of nickname of Cyclone King for a few years, because I would go into Bangladesh to photograph the cyclones, and I could move around very fast because of my origin. I can speak Pidgin Bengali, and I had gone in '88 to photograph for National Geographic quite extensively in Bangladesh, and I knew the place, so it was easy for me to move around. This is in Chittagong. This was Chittagong Airport, and Air Force planes flooded out. Now we sort of move a bit, and during, the sort of transition between going into media and when I was working in being a stills photographer, there were periods where my career wasn't going very well, or I was just wondering, what am I doing, why am I doing, all that sort of stuff, like what maybe Saurabh is going through now, or Vidur. We all have self-doubt, and we have problems with the medium, or where it should take us, or where we want to take us. So one of the things I started to do is sort of look at the history of photography, and part of it was because there was an American historian who was working with women's history of photography through photographs, and Dr. Geraldine Forbes and me became quite friendly. And I had access to Bond and Shepherd, which is one of the oldest studios now burnt down, and be able to go through their collection of glass plates. So I was sort of started to look around for material, and those days it was much easier to find. So I acquired this set of glass negatives, which is from the studio of Johnson and Hoffman, from a dealer who would sell anything from old camera lenses, albums. And in fact, this sort of body of work did influence my later work, which I'll show you.
When did you get this problem? This archive?
This must have been in the late 70s. During when I was photographing for the chess player Shatranj Ke Khiladi. That's Goom, which is where the toy train sort of is able to reverse at that time. Now, of course, this whole area is very built up. I guess this is on the Banaras Ghat. A professional letter writer, Panwala, silversmith or goldsmith, boiler room wallas. And then I also came across film stills from sort of mythological themes, and I suspect it's sort of Ramayana. So it was interesting for me to come across this material. I was working as a stills photographer, and to then find Can anybody read the story in the sequence of pictures? And I think it has to be kind of, I think this is Ramayana. So in '89, I sort of started to go to the Northeast, and the reason I was always curious about the area was because my father told me stories of when they were walking from Burma. They walked through the Naga tribes, and for a tribe who was supposed to be headhunters, my father and his family and the other people traveling with them received great hospitality. And I think refugees march when you're tired. It's very welcome to be welcomed. And he told me about how the village would take them in, find them places to sleep, cook for them. Sometimes very interesting stuff, which I won't mention now, go into that. But nevertheless, and these are stories that have remained with me, and then it propelled me to go into the Naga hills. These are hills which are not very high, they're sort of 6,000 feet. That's in Arunachal, a Naga village. And the Nagas are like 30 tribes which are scattered over Arunachal Pradesh. There's Nagaland and Manipur, and a little bit in Assam. And of course there's Burma Naga, because you know the tribes are all over before the political boundaries got divided. Basically a megalithic culture. That's the stone of origin for the Ao tribe. Angami tribe, a woman coming back with wood. This is in the Angami area. And the Nagas are great sculptors, especially the cognacs. Like here, this is one piece of wood which is 20 feet in length and 16 feet in height. So you can imagine how big the tree would have been. You don't see these sort of trees anymore. The log drum is an instrument for celebration, like it's being used here, or as some of you may know, and those who don't, that this is the place the Nagas have been fighting for independence much longer than the Kashmiris. It's been a low-level warfare, and in the 50s, 60s, into the 70s, the army has been very brutal. So this was used as a warning device. Whenever the army was sighted, one village to the other, the log drums would sort of beat. It's also used as an alarm system because everything is wood, and if there's a fire in the village, they beat the log drums. So these are many different tribes. This is the Pom tribe, again, the Pom. This is the Cognacs, again the Cognacs. That's the Cognacs celebrating their New Year in front of a skull hut. That's a human head which is being dressed with mithun horns, and the chief of Shingachinyu village in his skull hut. The wives of the chief of Shingachinyu. This is the village chairman of Tobu village, his wife with this wonderful necklace made out of cut conch shells. A village shaman in Mon village. The Ang of Shangnu village with the megaliths, and here they would erect them every time a head was taken. Antelope ears, antelope horns as earrings and tattoos. The deputy Ang's wife with her wonderful beads and feathers. The bridal dress of the Tankur tribe. Sema girl. This tribe I'm now forgetting, but they're the only ones, the Noctes, they're the only ones that don't weave, but buy silk from Assam. The lion headdress in the Tankur tribe. These are Zilian Rongmai villagers at a funeral. And then now I go off on a completely different tangent very quickly. This is the first time I'm sort of kind of talking about it. This is my other life that I lead. In the sort of late 90s, there was this big acquisition by Getty and Corbis that sort of swallowed up a lot of the smaller photo agencies, and the one that I used to work for was called Gamma Liaison. And I have another member here who was part of it, Bob Nicholsberg. And so once Getty bought Gamma Liaison, the New York end of it, I sort of chose to go independent, and one of the things that I was thinking about was how do we compete in the internet age with tools. So I set up a little company and we made photo database systems which could be kind of delivery search, buy, delivery, and deliver kind of systems. And then went on to sort of broaden it. And one of the big things that we did was for a 7-year period, we ran for the World Press Photo a kind of intranet where post their seminars, so everything that you see in orange, the countries, a lot in Africa, a hell of a lot in Asia, a little bit in South America, was where the World Press Photo did workshops, and post the workshops, the students and the tutors could keep in touch in an interactive way where stories could be edited feedback could be given. So these are, I can't read from here, but I think it's in Turkey? Colombia, okay. And that's the Rogues Gallery from India. Me and Raghu were tutors. Prashant was also involved. And you could click into any of those thumbnails and go into the galleries. And then you had Picture of the Week, where from everywhere in the world, the people administrating the site, we just did the technical end, would be able to profile a picture. There would be some discussion about it. And then this is the workshop in Africa. And pretty much this is the way the sort of tutor would be able to look at stuff, shift, change sequence, delete images, comment. And then they had modules where you could have actually, subject matter. And then they were in multiple languages, depending on, regions, because a lot of Africa, it's French. Or in Latin America, it would be Spanish. And this is some of the other systems that we designed for clients, which was a complete sort of system of being able to get photographs from different kinds of relationships that a media house would have, and then distribute it to be used internally in their publications and share. And that's pretty much as straightforward what I use for my archive, which is, a photo library system. That's how, if you come in as an anonymous guest, and then if you are a registered user, the various things that show up. And then now I use this for the gallery, the limited edition prints. So we have a flavor for that. All right, back to photographs. So I started in 1989, Indians in America. And basically, it was just the whole, again, in my mid-30s, I started to have a churning. I was doing a lot of media work, but that still wasn't satisfying, so I wanted to go out. And part of it is, there's a sort of thread that now I can read of how I was thinking and feeling. And in the mid-30s, I started having this churning of, I wanted to go and look at how other Indians kind of lived in different parts. Part of it was sort of like questioning my own Indianness, because I come from this sort of mixed origin. So this is Indians in France. I got money from a museum to do this project. And here in France, I looked at people who came from the French islands, Indians who went to Mauritius, because it was French, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Reunion. Some of them are still French islands, and Indians went as indentured labor. And then this is probably fourth generation which has arrived in France. And to see how, the culture, whether it's intact or changed. That's Deepak Anant, the art critic.
Indentured labor.
Well put. A writer, Paul, Ramli. And then, of course, the Sikhs go everywhere. And that's in the outskirts of Paris. This is just a sort of small fragment. And then I went on a geo story to Mauritius and part of it took me into these areas, but I also wanted very consciously to use the photo story to photograph Indians. And the Indians are the largest group in Mauritius. So these are women working in sugarcane fields. I guess they were, not I guess, they were, their ancestors were indentured labor. Sugar factories. And the Indian community is so big that they've built themselves these gigantic worship places. A wedding in the street, at the beach. And I thought, everybody sort of says, what are you doing now? Why are you only working with the archive? So I've cut all that out because a lot of it is being exhibited now. And this is in continuation with the Indians project. I was early part of this year for 3 months in the UK. And it's work which is still, I haven't looked at it enough to edit it down, but I just thought I'd show an assembly of pictures to show how I'm going, what there is. Can anybody read Gujarati here? Or Bengali? I think they all say the same thing.
They all say the same.
Yeah. Just not to spit. And what I started to look at is the remnants of the industrial era. So that's one way I may go with this project, is maybe just this way. I don't know how I'm going to sort of really work it as yet. Everywhere, in every picture that you see, there have been Indians in some way or the other involved, living, working. Leicester. I wanted to go to the Midlands because that's where you see, the industrial world or the remnants of it. And there are white people too, because, that's where rightfully is their land. So that's sort of, where I'm at with this at the moment. I may go back and shoot more. At the end of the day, what I hope to try and do is assemble together all the countries that I've been photographing in, and then maybe do a book and an exhibition. But for the moment, I've been working with the archive, the family archive, which is my father's photographs, my photographs. And the current form that I'm working in is exhibitions that I did in 1980. And I don't know if you recognize the man in the photo. So that's years ago at Chidarani Gallery, 1980, I had my Outsider series where I had eunuchs, the drug addicts, the rag pickers, on as an exhibition. That was then. I moved it to Bombay to Jahangir Art Gallery, and that's the way it was shown. Some of you may recognize the picture in the middle. It's up there. It's part of the street photography show. And then I started working on my archive in 2005, and then in 2007 it went to the photo festival AL, where there were 10 Indian photographers showcased, and I was one of them. And this is my most personal work in terms of my friends and family. Some of it, of course, is being incorporated into the dialogues with my father, the pictures that you saw. That's how the same body of work was run in Berlin, at Bodhi Berlin, when the Bodhi Gallery was still around. That was at the NGMA, the National Gallery of Modern Art in Bombay. And every time I would go to a city, and if I found people who were part of the pictures, and that's Ador when she was young, and how she is now, a few years ago. So that's how the same body of work was in a sort of in China, in a photo festival in Changsha. And then working with my father's body of work, that's at Chatterjee and Lal. That's at Photo Inc. when we did a show of my father's work, and Photo Inc. is my father's galleries. And this is the sleeping and reading series, all very densely packed down a corridor. That was when the first time me and my father showed together in Calcutta at the Harrington Street Gallery, and they had a booze company sponsor posters and lots of whiskey at the opening. And it's one of the most beautiful spaces that I've exhibited in, and my father's work has been in Calcutta. But it's one of the most beautiful spaces in India. And that was more recently in a very small gallery in London called the Fish Bar. Again, my father's work and mine. My father's in very classic form, silver gelatine prints, matted prints, and mine printed on vinyl in this very small, densely packed, with pictures, this room, top lit, so everything, sort of different, and that's where it all started. Thank you. Theater, and those of you who'd like to come up there and have a chat, we could do it that way. Is there any dying to ask questions? Anybody dying to ask questions? Yes.
I'm struck there's no images related to Burma.
Because, my father came out at age 12 or 13, I don't even know. And like William said, is he still here? He may not be. My father never spoke about his ancestry, so that's a complete blank. I've recently been contacted after I started putting his stuff on the net. Some people contacted me from Thailand saying we are related. So I have been to Burma. I went in 1983 on a National Geographic assignment. I tried to look for the family. I was unsuccessful. Part of it, at that time, I just looked through the phone books to see if there were any Bartholomews. No. I tried to go to his school, St. Paul's in Rangoon, which is quite well located, and it's a prestigious school. I couldn't get anything out of anybody, and in '83 there was great fear to talk to strangers also. By '89, when I went back on some corporate assignments, things had changed, and but I just couldn't trace anything, and that was put down by people. By then, I had contacts in the media, and there were people from AFP who had spoken to the bureau there, and they said the problem is that Burmese who came back, who may have left, basically Burmese with Christian names left. Burmese with Burmese names stayed because the Japanese were not going to harm them. But Burmese with Christian names had the fear of being persecuted as being part of the Allied group. So when they returned, they were kind of forced to go back to their Burmese names. So, there is no record. But I'm hoping now that I will go to Thailand and start that process. And my Burma work is not very interesting, up to now, so there's nothing from my part. My father's, he was too young.
Pablo, why aren't you doing books? Your books?
Oh, because I hate publishers and the way they diddle you out. Every photographer that I've talked to here just sort of say that they made no money off, except I think Amit may have. Yeah, you did, good. But authors, literary authors seem to do very well, but photographers somehow don't. I don't know why that is. Of course, you will never sell those numbers, but I think even if you did sell fairly well, somewhere the publishers, and that's why I think now the new technologies are so alluring. There's ebooks and there's print on demand. So I'm looking. The only things that I have is the gallery catalogs. So they're like books. Both my father has one, which 3 galleries did, and Body Art did mine. and they are available for those who would like to look or buy at the Photo Ink book stand. Mine is called Outside In, and my father's is A Critic's Eye. But to answer your question, I am working on a book. I may have to self-finance it if I don't find a publisher, but it's my father's book, and it's a big break, and I can show you. This is going to be art writings from the 50s, 60s into the 70s, and I think early 80s. It's his writings on contemporary Indian art. It's something which is all his colleagues and contemporaries have been wanting done. It's now many years since he died, so this should be out sometime next year. I know the auction houses are salivating. Literally, every time I see them, they say, when is the book? When is the book? Because it's going to ratify so much of the work that they can sell for so many more millions. So, but you know, at the end of the day, to answer your question, I'm an unsuccessful, unpublished photographer. I could. Everybody want to run off? I want to show this very bad experiment because, so many people have been doing, there's so much video. When I did the France project, I was forced by the museum to produce something which could be a wrap-up, and but they told me in the beginning once I started to work. So I started to shoot in a certain way. I'm not sure if it quite kind of worked, but it was sort of fun to do. It was one of the few things. It's the only thing that I've really done. But I may do something else in the future. I don't know. But take a look. You can always be very critical about it. My mother married out of her community in the 1930s and got disowned by them. My mother went one step further and married a Burmese. So I come from a family where identities have always been a question. I am not a Punjabi or a Bengali or a Burmese. I am all these and none. While it throws up questions and conflicts, it almost gives me an escape route to be free. It is this freedom that propels me to travel and seek answers in others' lives, and thus my dialogue with the Indians in France. In my work in the late 80s on the Indians in America, I examined the two worlds of the migrant Indian, the inner world which he brought within himself, the world of roots, religion, of tradition, of Indianness. And I saw how much of it was retained and preserved in the exterior world, the world he or she currently lives in. What is the relationship between the two? How does one world manifest itself in the other? What are the relationships, adjustments, juxtapositions of signs and symbols that might explain the truth between the two worlds? So many varied ethnicities and languages that we have in India is mirrored in a smaller sense in France, but my questions remain the same.
Je m'appelle Ranjit Singh, je suis un Sikh français. मेरा नाम Ranjit Singh, et मैं एक French Sikh है.
Je m'appelle Valérie Horton, je suis française, originaire de Pondichéry. என் பேர் Valérie Horton, நான் பிறந்தது பிரான்ஸ்ல, எங்க அப்பா அம்மா பிறந்தது பாண்டிச்சேரி.
Je m'appelle Akitam Narayan, je viens de Kerala, un petit état de l'Inde, et je vis en France depuis 40 ans. Je suis artiste peintre, et puis voilà, c'est ça. Je vais vous expliquer la même chose en Malayalam. ഞാൻ കേരളത്തിൽ നിന്നാണ്. എൻ്റെ പേര് നാരായണൻ അക്കിത്തം എന്നാണ്. ഫ്രാൻസിൽ 42
Je m'appelle Onshu, je suis peintre graveur, je viens de Kolkata, Inde. আমার নাম অঞ্জু, আমি শিল্পী, ছবি আঁকি, কলকাতা থেকে এসেছি ভারতবর্ষে।
Walls have always fascinated me. When entering someone's home, it is the objects on the walls and the items on the shelves and cupboards that tell a story. Then, it is the juxtaposition of the people that I photograph in front of the walls that completes the picture. Sometimes, it can be the absence of the people and just the room that suggests the story. And then, every viewer can interpret the picture in their own way. When you sit and talk to the people, there is always the talk of the tie with their homeland, of family, of return, sometimes permanent return when they have settled their children, secured their daughters' marriages, if not here in France, at home. Ideally, marriage should be within the community, if not, then with an Indian, or someone from the larger subcontinent of South Asia. To marry white French seems to be a remote idea, but it does happen more and more as the younger generations born here in France are as French as anybody else. People from Bengal, the Parsis, people from North India came as students to study, stayed on, or came as professionals or for the arts. Most painters came to study and stayed to make a life here. Hardest, I believe, is for the people who came from the French islands, whose grandparents went as indentured labor. Sometimes their ancestors had no record of what part of India they came from, so they may know the region, the land that they are from, may even have family there, but no contact. In one manner, I empathize with them, for I too do not know my father's side of the family, only that I come from a neighboring country. From political refugees to economic refugees, there is a constant flux of Indians still coming to France. Some again for higher studies, maybe they will stay on. The cycle goes on.
Eiffel Tower, I've got power. जो भी मुझे देखे, बोले hello flower. तो है मुझे से प्यार, बनना चाहे सब मेरे यार. Eiffel Tower, I've got power. जो भी मुझे देखे, बोले hello flower. French toast, French fries, French kiss. Champs-Élysées. We do show. देर न करो. चलो चलो रे बाबा चलो चलो. Let's go. भूख लगेगी बिना टेंशन से. पीते पीते देख ना मेरा रूप. भूख लगेगी बिना टेंशन से.
Those who would like to talk to me further, really appreciate it. Thank you.